Hello and welcome everyone. This is Tacozilla the Vanilla Gorilla here. Just put together this list of 25 black and white films, top 25 of the 70 that I've seen so far, which may or may not sound like a lot, but we are freestyling and profiling here, just covering why the films that I chose are in the top 25, why you should see them, what makes them great. And starting at the top, we have La Haine, which translates to in French hate. It's a really good story about kind of French protests after a incident in which there was police brutality, which ends in a very climactic ending. I don't want to give too much else away, but the cinematography is really dazzling and the story is definitely deep and meaningful. I really recommend it. Great film. Up next, Hidden Fortress. Toshihiro Mifune is going to be coming up again and again on this list. Very good performance by him, but a very interesting story by Akira Kurosawa. I highly recommend it. Definitely a solid samurai film, but there's going to be some that I think are even better on this list. 23, we have M by Fritz Lang. This is a deep, impactful story where Peter Lorre plays the antagonist, but you feel for the antagonist in a way that I think is very unique for the time period in which this came out. This is kind of one of those classic black and white films. Hidden Fortress is a little bit of that too. La Haine was done for dramatic effect, but when M came out, black and white was the style of the time. Color really wasn't what it is now, and used almost exclusively. But this story is really, really interestingly done, and one that I feel like you have to see to truly understand what makes Peter Lorre great, what makes Fritz Lang great, but also what the decade in which this came out and was capable of. Because I don't think, certain decades you don't think about how great the stories could be, but they can be very tremendous, and this is a perfect example of that. Up next, we have Paths of Glory, one that Ethan and I covered in our Stanley Kubrick ranked video, which I recommend you checking out if you are a Kubrick fan. This is a tremendous war film for sure, no doubt about that. Short and to the point, and it really gives a cutting criticism of the war machine and what higher ups kind of think about their soldiers in certain situations. And it's not a generalization for sure, but kind of how blasé they can be about putting others' lives on the line if it means that they can get themselves ahead. Up next at 21, we have The Passion of Joan of Arc. This is a silent black and white film, so it is really, really of the style of the time, really unique from that aspect. I think it is the only silent film that is on this top 25 list, which admittedly there was a lot of what you would consider like a classic period kind of missed. A lot of the 30s films, some of the monster films of the 30s are honorable mentions, you would say. But some of the great films that had to be in black and white, I've yet to see. And I want to hear your recommendations for them. Something I missed, let me know in the comments down below, because I definitely want to check out more black and white films, but I can say for certain I did not miss out on The Passion of Joan of Arc. It is really, really great. The lead performance is one of the best examples of just really stealing the show when you don't have all the aspects to do so. You don't have your voice to do so. You don't have color to do so, which arguably can be more or less important as far as getting your performance across. But I thought that a lot was able to get across, especially without being able to use your voice. Up next, number 20, we have Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal. This is a biblical story of sorts in which death has picked his man, and the seven trumpeters trumpet at the end. There's no spoilers there, obviously, but once you see it, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. And if you're familiar with biblical references, that might give you an idea of what is going on in this film. But it's really well done. It's metaphorical. It's pretty deep. I think Bergman is one of the best working in black and white. I think Kurosawa is up there too, and I'm sure we're going to see more Kurosawa moving forward. But this is maybe Bergman's most popular, and for very good reason, because this is a really, really well done film that is a lot deeper than just a run-of-the-mill film, which is kind of Bergman's one of his strengths. I would definitely check this out because I think it is a huge, huge part of cinematic history. It is one of the best movies of all time, according to some, and definitely one of the best black and white films of all time. Up next, we have Anatomy of a Murder. Great performance by, who else? James Stewart. Really got into these legal dramas with Matt, aka War Champ, and we did a video on this film as well as a film that is going to be at number 17, and I highly suggest you check out that film. And also, hey, if you're here still, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You know you already like this video, you stuck around this long, and you're going to like all the other videos that I have done up until this point. So subscribe to the channel, check out what I have in my library, because over 100 videos, I feel like there's going to be a ton of stuff that you will like. But Anatomy of a Murder is really good. Solid cast, and it really shows you the ins and outs of the legal process while also kind of elevating it a little bit for entertainment value. But it is a great example of a lawyer trying to explore the law to the best of his extent. Good performances. Definitely check it out for the performances. Up next, we have My Night at Maud's. This was a film that I watched with Matt, again, aka War Champ, in which we explored Eric Rohmer, 2 films of his, and the one that stood out to me was My Night at Maud's. Check out the video with Matt for sure to get a deeper analysis. But of the 2 films we watched, the first 2 films that I've seen of Eric Rohmer, he is a tremendous director. He did something very, very special with this film. It allows you to kind of explore an idea that you can tell is really captured his imagination and play it out in a way that makes you think about the theory in which he presents in this film. One of the few films that I've ever seen that I can really strongly point to as a great example of that. Very unique in that way and very, very interesting. I think if you like to kind of have thoughts simmer in your head while you're watching them, you like to kind of think about your films after the fact and really try to piece together what the message from the director was, My Night at Maud's is a tremendous example of that. Number 17, we have Judgment at Nuremberg. Very solid performances here, but very powerful and poignant. This is a film that is, you may be able to tell from the title, but for some of those who historically aren't super familiar, this is about the judgment of judges, which is, try saying that 5 times fast, who presided in Nazi Germany during the Third Reich, and they're trying to look at legally if what they did was criminal or not. Whilst doing so, it also kind of explores the changing focus of the world at large, but specifically the US, as communism became a bigger threat than what we felt the Nazis had done during their reign. Politically, I feel like it's very interesting for that, and I know politics rather in movies can oftentimes clash really hard, but this is something that I think there's a lot of time between, when this came out and when this was really relevant to now, to where I don't know if you'll be super emotionally charged watching it, and it kind of gives you an outsider's perspective to just kind of observe what the mindset was during this time. So I don't think it's going to morally outrage or make you cheer on what the actions being taken were, but it's very interesting nonetheless. And there are emotional attachments because you are trying to grapple with what is right and wrong in your own mind. At least that was the perspective that I had. That movie was also covered in the Legal Dramas podcast with Matt, aka War Champ. So check that out if you want a deeper analysis. Number 16, 12 Angry Men. This was a film in which, again, Matt and I covered in our Sidney Lumet video. And I think this is arguably one of the best debuts, directorial debuts. Lumet obviously, or not obviously, for those who are unaware, had experience in television before becoming a movie director. But this is what I would consider to be one of the best legal dramas. It's done differently because it's done in the jury box of sorts while they're trying to come to their verdict. And really great performances by every juror. Henry Fonda, he kind of leads the show, does a tremendous job. It's a tight, snappy script that keeps you completely invested the entire time. If you haven't seen it at all, I have to say it is one of the films that you really, really should go out of your way to watch. It is so freaking good. And you're watching this video, so you're not turned off by black and white films, but this is a film that I have argued with multiple people who, even if they want to avoid black and white films because it just seems bland to them, or, oh, that's an old-timey film, this is a timeless film. And I know it's been, I think, redone or a sequel or a reboot, whatever it was. I know there is another 12 Angry Men by a relatively famous director. But this is one that holds up still. I watched it in high school, which is a time in which I was really anti, like, old films, quote unquote. But I was blown away by it then, and after rewatching it, rightfully so. Number 15, another film by Akira Kurosawa. We have Ikaru, which is one of the films without Mifune that I was just like, wow, he's able to do it with multiple people. And the story is so touching, so emotional, that it just shows a side of Akira Kurosawa where he can do contemporary films for the time, obviously, that really stick with you. And it just felt like a completely different side of him that just really, really impressed me. I have a slight bias, or I guess preference, towards his samurai works, but Ikaru and another film that we're going to be covering later on shows that Akira Kurosawa can really get it done in a multitude of ways. And I highly recommend Ikaru because it is sad, but also kind of uplifting and optimistic in a less than cheesy way. 14, we have Sanjuro. This is Mifune doing what Mifune does best, and that is be the most charismatic man on screen. This is a sequel to a film that is going to be coming up later on this list. Really, really well done. And if you watched the film in which this is a sequel for, that's what you needed. You wanted to just see more of this character because Mifune's lead man was so charismatic, so interesting, that you just wanted more of him, and that's why it's this high on the list. I definitely recommend it if you like Kurosawa samurai films, and if you liked the film in which this is a sequel for. Next, we have Samurai Rebellion. Mifune is in this, and, you know, we covered this, actually, Ethan and I, in a video in which I highly suggest you check out. Really well done. Kobayashi, the director, is really great at efficient plots. And this is kind of different because there's an interesting story, and then the leading man kind of changes from the first half to the second half. So Mifune really takes over in the second half. Dramatic ending. I really, really enjoyed how that one ended, and thought this film was really, really great. 12, and now we're starting to get to some of the most iconic films of all time. We have Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And if this is a number 12, then you have to realize, hey, some of the films coming up in the top 10 are going to be absolute heavyweights. But Psycho is a film that I think everyone is relatively familiar with, even before you've seen it, because I actually saw it all the way through for the very first time this calendar year. And look, I know that's crazy to say, but I did know a lot of it. A lot of the twists and turns I was already privy to, and that is part of the reason why I delayed it, because I felt as though I wouldn't be able to get the most out of it, because this is a film that has some pretty spectacular twists and turns. I thought knowing those would kind of spoil the film for me, but I have to say, even knowing them, the execution in both script and cinematography and performance makes this very much worthwhile, even knowing the big twists. If you don't know the big twists, then this is probably going to be your favorite movie you've seen this year. If you do know the big twists, look, I did too. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I was able to kind of look deeper and like, hey, like, man, this cinematography is really well. Anthony Perkins' performance is just spectacular. I can't believe they did this during this time period. You're kind of able to admire it, kind of knowing what is still coming. And I think you will be able to admire it as well. Up next, number 11, Citizen Kane. For the longest time as a kid, I'll preface this by saying I was one of the people who would do this thoroughly, not see a movie and then kind of talk smack on it like, oh, that's a boring whatever, it's black and white, it's overrated, never having seen it. And then I go and I watch these films and I have to completely eat my words. Citizen Kane is an example of that. For the time in which this came out, this film must have been like fireworks in the theater, because I during this time period there are very, very few films that are as interesting, as well paced, as grand as this one. And even not, if you decide not to look at it through that lens and just watch it for just a film, compared to anything else that is coming out now and whatnot, it's still really, really good. And it's better than a lot of the films that are coming out now. Maybe some of the very best that are coming out now can be on that level, but this is genuinely a masterpiece. I know some people may disagree with that, but consensus-wise, it's one of the best films of all time, and the hype is real as far as I'm concerned. And if you like films, like you've seen any of the films that I've put on this list so far, if you had interest in them and haven't seen Citizen Kane, I'm telling you, check it out. I had the very same reservations that you probably are having now, but it is so worth it because it is a masterpiece. Now we're into the top 10, and we have an iconic duo for sure in James Stewart and John Ford in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. This is a John Ford film, a director with whom I gained familiarity with through some of the conversations I had with Guillermo, aka GDQ, someone I did videos with previously, and also Matt, Ethan. Very well-respected director, someone who has done Westerns to the best of their ability. And I know Westerns have... You feel like you know what you're getting into with it. And this is a film that's just a really, really well-written and interesting story that just so happens to be a Western. It's almost like Citizen Kane in a Western way of sorts, where you get the story of what made James Stewart, and why John Wayne was so very important into him becoming the great man that he is. It's legitimately a spectacular film. I can't strongly recommend it enough, and one of the best Westerns of all time. At number 9, we have another Kubrick film, one that I strongly recommend you watch, and if you want some deeper analysis, check out the Kubrick ranked video, but it is Doctor Strangelove, with some of the best performances and the most cutting satire. This is a film that I put on my films that any movie fan must watch list, because it is the best satire of all time as far as I'm concerned. I have not seen a better satire than this. And it's Kubrick, I think, at a very decisive point in his career. Once he hit on Doctor Strangelove, he went on a run that very few, if any, directors have gone on. Definitely check this out. Some people consider it to be the funniest movie or best comedy that they've ever seen, and I would say it is the best satire ever made. Number 8, it is the movie that I alluded to with Sanjuro. It is Yojimbo. Mifune is spectacular in this. I love this story so much. It is just a great, character-driven narrative of sorts, and told in a way that was just so unique to me when I first saw this film. You have to check it out. It's a film inspired by Westerns that would probably go on to inspire Westerns as well, because it has that great iconic anti-hero and is just so interestingly done. I can't recommend it enough. It's one of my favorite Akira Kurosawa films and one of my favorite performances by Toshiro Mifune. Going on to number 7, we have Andrei Tarkovsky's Andrei Rublev. This is one of my favorite films by Tarkovsky. It is 3 hours long, but it includes one scene. It's kind of a longer scene in which there's a raid done, and I absolutely love it because it shows something that Akira Kurosawa is actually really well known for, where there's just a massive amount of movement being captured. It makes you feel like you're watching something grand unfold. And it's a very interesting, deep, and meaningful story about Rublev that I think is very powerful, meaningful, and worthwhile. Next, we have High and Low, the other contemporary film that I was talking about when going over some of Akira Kurosawa's works. It shows that, he's kind of a Swiss Army knife, but even better. Like, he's able to do multiple things very, very well. It's a story that kind of puts you in the shoes of the central character and what a tough decision he would be through, but also a really tremendous crime story that has multiple layers and kind of different points of interest that I just cannot recommend highly enough. Up next, Scorsese makes an appearance on the list with Raging Bull, one of the best boxing movies, one of the best sports movies, one of the best performances by Robert De Niro. This, of course, is the story about Jake LaMotta, a boxer who has a successful yet tumultuous career and sort of fall from grace. It goes over the personality that was Jake LaMotta. It's one of the, I don't know if darkest is too strong a word, but grittiest biopics about someone that shows that character warts and all, and is ultimately what makes it such an interesting character study. We jumped into the top 5 with Raging Bull, and now on to number 4 with Rashomon, another Kurosawa film. Obviously, he's a director that I very much love. Rashomon is groundbreaking for what it does narratively, giving the perspective of different characters within the story and because they all have different perspectives, the narrative changes with their perspective. I think, and I could very well be wrong on this, but this is kind of the first of its kind, and probably put a lot of directors just on the back foot, as far as I didn't even know this was something that we could do. Uh, Probably books had done it, and movies are probably super, super impacted by that medium. I would imagine there's probably a few books that really did this and did it very well. But seeing it in this medium done for the first time and done so well was something that I think forever changed the game. And maybe I'm giving Kurosawa too much credit. Maybe there's another movie that did it more popularly or more or executed better. But this was just done so well, and to my knowledge is the first to really do it on this stage and execute it that well. Number 3, Kobayashi makes his second appearance on the list with Herikeri, and this is a film that is one of the most efficient scripts, efficient narratives, and has a turn that is just so loved by me. I really highly recommend this film. Such a great samurai story, such a great narrative. Any screenwriter out there, it's in Japanese, but it's just so engaging and so interesting that you really want to check this out if you want to become one of the great screenwriters. Next, we have Ingmar Bergman making another appearance on the list with Persona. This is another example of a film that has a twist that completely blew my mind. It was the one that made me realize that Bergman was, in my opinion, one of the best of all times. And that was after the fact that I had seen some of his really strong works, some of the iconic works that people, that were the pieces that made them look at Bergman a different way. And I'm talking about Wild Strawberries, an honorable mention on this list. And I'm talking about the other film in which I already mentioned, which is Seven Seal. That film, Seven Seal, it did illuminate me to, like, Bergman has done something special. He has a very unique style, but Persona was the one that showed me this man can touch upon something that is just speaks on a completely different level to me. It felt like it transcended what even masterfully done films. One of the best films of all time as far as I'm concerned, and I can't highly recommend it enough. And that leads us with just one film left, and that film for me is Seven Samurai. For me, it's one of the best war films of all time. It's one of the best samurai films of all time, and one of Kurosawa's absolute best. This is a samurai film as it should be done. It gives him full range to tell a story, a samurai film, and put everything that he absolutely can into it to make it the best story. And he delivered. I think it's his magnum opus, and you've seen how many films of Kurosawa has been on here thus far. Quite a few. He is very talented. He is capable of doing some tremendous stuff. And I think his colored pictures works are tremendous too. Some of my favorite Kurosawa films are in color. I'm talking about Ran, I'm talking about Kagemusha. But I think this is his magnum opus. It's the one that he set out to make to define his career. And again, I said he delivered. And I think that's the sales pitch, because if you've seen any of his works, you likely are a fan of his. And if you want to see what he is capable at in his prime, putting it all out there and trying to tell the story, the ultimate story that he wants to tell, this is the one to watch. I really appreciate you all joining me on this top 25 black and white movies ranked list. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You enjoyed this video, give it a like and comment down below your favorite black and white films. And I will catch you all on the flippity flip. Bye, y'all.